beautiful Wednesday, June 6th. Summer is just moving right along, and I'm excited to be your host, Diane Gatsis Havinga, for a really, I think, a very interesting special Village in Motion, because we're going to be talking about Ramadan. And it's something that we hear about here in the United States, but I don't think a lot of people pay too much attention to it. And it's such an important part of, I don't know, the vast majority of the world's population. And here to talk to us about this important season is Emily Apyan. I know I slaughtered that. I'm sorry. Apyan, excuse me. She's the assistant living manager over at Garden Ridge. And Emily, you've been on the show before.
I have.
We did a spiritual journey together. Were you an intern at the time? I can't remember.
I was either an intern or I had just started
as a social worker.
As a social worker.
So that's how Emily and I got to know each other, was when she started about 4 years?
About 4 years ago.
4 years ago as a social worker intern. You worked with Sue Frankie. And
correct.
Anyway, we started talking and became, I hope, good friends. Yes. And had her on for a spiritual journey. So I don't want to really get into the whole religious aspects, although we will touch on it. But can you recap why at the age of 18?
Yes, I'll give sort of the 30-second version of how I got to where I am. I'm a Muslim. I practice Islam. I was not raised as a Muslim. My parents are both Christian. My dad is actually Armenian and my mother is American. My dad's American, also Armenian American. But when I was 18, I made the decision through my own sort of searching and traveling and reading that I wanted to become a Muslim. So I took what is called Shahada, or made the announcement that I wanted to be a Muslim. I did that when I was 18. I wasn't married. I wasn't trying to get married. I didn't know my spouse at the time. It was a decision that I made for myself. And it's been a lifelong decision so far, and been a good thing. So I'm open to talk about it and ask questions. I know that's not why we're here today, but that's sort of a nutshell of how I got to be here.
So having said that, now let's kind of switch gears, so to speak, and talk about our topic. And the reason we're talking about Ramadan, if you haven't noticed or heard about it, our viewers that is that we're in pretty much the middle of the holiest season of the year for your faith. And I just wanted to start with my impressions. When I went to Turkey, it happened to be, I think, at the end of Ramadan. And one of the things you see all over the place when you travel, and I'm thinking it's not just Turkey, is you see colors and flags. And one thing I wanted to pause is to have people listen to the call for prayer. So if we can just up that audio so we can hear that. So that's the call for prayer, where you hear throughout the day and night, no matter where you are in a country that is predominantly Muslim, you're going to hear that call to prayer. And you're seeing people right now this is the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. And people, well, mainly men at this point, praying. You see all these lights, and you see them inside the mosque, but you see them everywhere you go. There are lights, people getting ready for prayer. And here, there's, in Bailey's Crossroads, there's a really, I think, concentration of Muslim. I mean, that when they say the Crossroads now, I'm thinking, they have it right on the money, because there's Christians, there's Hindus, the little Vietnam is there.
Right.
You have Muslims. I mean, when I go to church, I'm seeing all sorts of people, and they're in this time of the year. If I go at night, I see those bright lights.
Exactly. So, and the same Muslims, we like to put bright lights, especially during Ramadan. They put them even in your home. Like the same way that for Christmas, Christians might decorate their home with lights and those things, Muslims do the same thing. My kids put up streamers and balloons and all kinds of festive stuff. In fact, Party City even has a section of Ramadan items now. So it's just a joyous occasion. It's the holy month, so you want to celebrate it in that way. Bailey's Crossroads is a great example. You have the Greek Orthodox church, and then you have a Protestant church whose parking lot we use when we overflow at the mosque, and they use our parking lot when they overflow. So it's a really good crossroads, and I think that's a great description.
And then the Catholic Church is up the street
exactly,
too.
and the Catholic Church is there too. So we got
Baptist Church.
Yeah. Yeah, so we got a lot of different representation there. Ramadan is our holiest month. So the word Ramadan actually is the name of the month. The same way that May is a month, or June is the month that we're in now. Ramadan is just the name of the month. Our calendar as Muslims, our lunar calendar, is slightly different than the Gregorian calendar that we use every day, the January through December, that Americans use. And so it's a month, it's a 29 to 30 day period month. So it depends, because with moon cycles, it depends when the sighting of the moon is. So Ramadan could be 29 days or 30 days. It depends on the year.
And it tends to go backwards, right?
Well, right now it is. So within
Okay.
the Gregorian calendar, it moves. So it's 29 or 30 days. Right now we're moving towards January by about 10 days annually. So this year, for example, Ramadan started on May 15th or 16th and will end on June 14th, 15th, or 16th, depending on when the sighting is, when they see the new moon. So it's
someone
moving.
Actually has to see the new.
So they declare it. Yes.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yes, and it's this sort of a topic that comes up with Muslims all over the world, because some Muslims start fasting on one day and other Muslims start the following day. Depending on where you geographically live, the sighting of the moon may be slightly different, and it's your intention. Whoever you follow, the Saudis in Mecca, they make a calling. The mosque here that you referred to, which is where my husband and I typically attend, they decided that Ramadan would start on the Wednesday. So we started fasting on the Wednesday, but I have some of my friends, some of my colleagues who started fasting on the Thursday. So, but in Christianity, you have different Christmases also, right?
And different Easters.
And different Easters.
Yeah, so I
Exactly.
get that. So let's talk a little bit, because you mentioned the fasting, and I think that's one thing that's more in the news when people hear about
Right.
Ramadan and what do you mean you're fasting?
Right.
And I don't think people understand first the reason for the fasting. What are you fasting from? It's not for 20 some days. You
Right.
are not eating or drinking. I know that for a fact.
Right.
But it is a very much a course of action that people follow.
Correct. So when I tell people I fast for 30 days, they look at me and go, well, how did you live through that? And I say, well, I don't mean that I don't eat anything or drink anything for 30 days. So for Muslims, the way in which we fast from sun up until sundown. Right now, where we are in the calendar, those are pretty long days because we're very close to the summer solstice, which is June 21st, right? So if we stop eating around 4:20, my son could tell you the exact minute, okay, because he's tracking it on his iPhone. But around 4:20 is when we stop eating and drinking in the morning, 4:20 a.m. And then we fast. We have nothing to drink or eat, so no water, no gum, no nothing, until the sun goes down, which right now is about 8:20. So you're fasting all day, which is 16 hours.
Yeah.
It's a pretty long fast. But remember, Ramadan moves, so it's not every year that it's going to be that long. When I first was a Muslim, Ramadan was in December, so it was really short days. By the time I got, home from work, I had already broken my fast, so it was much easier. So it's not always going to be the super long days.
And you allow, not you, but the religion allows for, like, young children aren't doing that type of fast. If a woman is pregnant, she
doesn't
not doing,
fast, right?
Or I'm assuming the elderly or anyone who is ill.
Exactly. So fasting is meant to be a time for you to remember the important things, to be humble, to remember people that don't have food. But it's not meant to be a punishment, right? It's not meant to be a punishment for 30 days. So anyone that would have something that would harm them or hurt them in any ways shouldn't fast. For example, young children, they don't fast. pregnant women don't have to fast. Breastfeeding women don't have to fast. If they feel like it's going to harm them or their child in any way, they have a card that says, no, you don't have to do it. People that have diabetes, any different types of medical conditions could make you decide, you know what, this is really too difficult for me. There are other things. There are provisions for people that aren't able to fast. And in lieu of fasting, they can buy food for someone who doesn't have food. So there are sort of things that you can do because you couldn't fast that make up for that, in a sense.
And plus, when you mention that 4:20 a.m. or
yeah, right,
whatever
exactly.
that mark. So what do you, tell us a little bit about
what is my day?
What's
am I
happening
feeling
at that point?
So
because it's not like you're sleeping at that hour.
Yeah, if any of you have seen me recently, since about May 15th until present time, if I looked a little more tired or slightly dazed, it was because you're sleeping a lot less. I get up in the morning around 3:45 to get breakfast ready for my husband, for myself. My husband gets up, helps me. My kids get up. My children actually do fast. They don't have to, but they want to. My daughter doesn't fast every day, but my son does. He's 12, and he wants to do it. He's not forced to do it if he said he really felt like he couldn't.
Of course, your youngest is a little too young.
Yes, my youngest is a little too young. He's not a year yet. But we get up together, we have breakfast together, we sit, we talk for a little bit, and then we pray together, because Muslims pray 5 times a day. So our first prayer is at that, once the adhan that you heard, that call to prayer, it's called an adhan. Once it goes off, we would pray. So we pray together in the morning.
So do you have that at your house? Do you have something that,
yes.
that you, okay.
So we have, any space in your home, even outside, if you prefer to pray, wherever you can find a place that's clean. You would have a rug. I'm sure many of you have seen the rugs. You would unroll the rug. Some people have an entire room that they designate to prayers in their house. And then you would pray. There's a particular way that you pray. I don't want to say formal, but there is a way of praying. It's not just like you sit and you ask God for things. That's something else. But this is our 5 obligatory prayers a day that we pray. So there are 5 of them. The first one is, like I said, really early in the morning. And then there's one in the afternoon, early afternoon. Then there's one at midday when the sun would be right overhead. One at sunset, and one right a couple hours after sunset in the evening time.
And of course, that all varies by the
all
season.
Varies by the season, exactly.
And that would be hard for me to keep.
Well, they have an app for that now, Diane,
Oh,
so it will let you know when it's time.
Little thing.
And you may hear that out in public sometimes. We have a lot of employees here at Green Spring that are Muslim, and so you may hear sometimes, you forget to turn your app off, right? You forget to something, and you will hear the adhan, that call to prayer. It actually does that on the phone.
And I know, again, basing just my experience in Turkey, it's there's actually a person who's making that call to prayer. It's not a recording, or
it's not a recording.
So it's a live individual. I'm pretty sure it's probably always a male, but correct me if I'm wrong.
It is always a male. It should always be a male. If you see, when you look at the architecture of mosques, like the blue mosque that you were showing pictures of, a video of earlier, or Hagia Sophia, they have what are called the minarets. And in history, someone would actually climb up to the minaret and call out to prayer. Now we have all sorts of great technology, so we can stand at the bottom with a microphone and it blasts it out all over the whole town. But yes, there is a person that would be doing it.
So you mentioned here at Green Spring you do pray. So under the law, every workplace has to enable their employees to practice their faith.
Reasonable accommodations.
Right. So do you have an actual room, or does it matter to you? Or
it doesn't matter to me. Everybody has their own personal preferences as to where they feel safe and comfortable praying. I have the luxury of having an office where that I'm able to pray. There are some employees that may come, that I've given some of my employees that I know are Muslim, they could come into my office to pray if they would like to. I've prayed together with employees at different times, colleagues of mine. And then we also have the chapel here at Green Spring, which I know is open to anyone of any faith can go there to pray. I've prayed in our chapel before too. It's not exactly convenient for me to necessarily run over there from Garden Ridge, but I know that that is an option. You can bring a prayer rug, go to the chapel and pray. And I think Green Spring does a great job of making those accommodations. If you were an employee or you had a question, I'm sure you could ask your manager, is there a space relative to where I work where I could pray?
So also with the video, we saw some people who were actually like washing their hands.
Yes.
So what's that all about, and
Yeah.
do you do that all the time?
I do that 5 times a day, if not more. Every time you're going to pray, you have to wash in a special way. So it's called wudu. It's W-U-D-U, wudu. And it's a way of washing that purifies you to make you clean. In the mosques in a lot of the world, these places are outside. So the area where you would wash could be outside or in a covered area in a terrace. In the mosques here in the US, they're mostly all indoors, but they're very well equipped. It's not in a bathroom. You can make wudu in a bathroom, but these are like really stations where it's meant for you to be able to wash. It's
So is the
very
water
systematic.
any kind of like a holy water?
Nope.
No,
It's
so
the Fairfax public water works here. So you would, but it's very, very routine. It's a certain way to do it. You wash your hands first, then you wash your mouth.
Or just with water?
Just water, and you have to do it 3 times. Wash your hands first, then you wash your mouth out 3 times, your nose 3 times, your arms from your elbow to your wrist you wash, and you always start on the right side because that's the clean side. And then you wash your face, and then you do your face 3 times. You do your head once, your ears once, and your feet each 3 times.
So do you take your headscarf off?
If at all possible, which I always try to make it possible, I will take off my headscarf because I want to be able to clean my hair, rinse my hair and my ears.
So would that be in a public area? I mean, so for you,
So for me,
are women separate then?
Yes, anytime you're washing up, you would be separate, unless you're in your own home, and then it wouldn't matter, because your husband and your sons can obviously see you without a scarf. But here, for example, I may go to the bathroom, or it would be a bathroom, and 90% of the time go to a private bathroom and be able to wash and clean yourself. The hardest part is when you have shoes and socks on and you want to wash your feet. That's the big, difficult part.
And since we mentioned the headscarf, remind people or tell people who may not know why it's so important for you to wear the headscarf and why you made the decision to wear that.
So not all Muslim women wear the scarf. It is something that is recommended and I would say was prescribed for women to wear a scarf. In the same way, I often speak about Islam, or I'll talk with my friends and I ask them, I said, well, what color hair does Mary have? Mary from the Bible, the mother of Jesus. They say, well, I think about it. I can see them thinking it. I can almost see the images sort of flashing across their memory. And then they come back and they say, I don't really know. And then I'll say, well, why don't you know? What is it about that makes you unable to remember? Because every time I've ever seen an image of her, she has on something that kind of looks like what you're wearing.
She has a veil on, and ever since you said that, must have been during the spiritual journey. And in the Orthodox faith, we have icons, and you know, the Virgin Mary is right up there. And every time now, and I'm always surrounded with her image, and I look at those and go, yeah, I haven't really seen that hair. She's right. And most of the female saints, you're right, they have covered. Yep. But surprisingly, the angels aren't, which I thought was interesting, that they have their hair full and flowing and so on and so forth.
So I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that. But for us, for Muslim women, it's a sign of modesty, right? That's something special. If you have something special, something that you value, your money or jewelry, you want to covet that in a way. You want to keep it private and something that you keep for those that are close to you, those that should see it. Obviously, my husband sees my hair. It's something that's beautiful, something I would want him to see. My son can see it, my father, my brothers. Any male that would not be able to have a romantic relationship with me, my father-in-law, for example, he can see my hair, right? But any man, for example, my colleagues or my friends or my neighbors, that's something special, something private. And the same reason why I cover myself, right? I don't always wear long skirts. Sometimes I wear pants with shorter dresses, but I'm always covered to my wrists and my ankles for modesty, for the same reason why a lot of modest women of other religions or other faiths cover.
Now, is your daughter as covered? I don't know if that's
She's
the right.
So my daughter is 10. She'll be 11 soon in a couple weeks, and she wears her scarf and would cover up when we're going to pray, because when you're praying, you're facing God, and that's very important to be modest. But every day, she doesn't cover her hair. She doesn't wear shorts. She doesn't wear clothes that I feel like are too revealing. And that's a judgment call for me as a mom. Every mom of any different faith has a preference or a feeling of what's appropriate for their child. But on Fridays, she does wear it, because I would like for her to wear the scarf if that's her decision. So on Fridays, which is our holy day of the week, she wears a scarf to school. But Monday through Thursday, she doesn't. Plus, it gives me a break from braiding her hair. But that has nothing to do with religion.
So let me just ask, so if she decides as she gets older that she doesn't want to wear the headscarf, is that going to be allowed? And I use that word.
Allowed. That's her decision. It was my decision to become a Muslim, right? So if my daughter chooses to wear a scarf, my son's wife chooses to wear a scarf, ultimately that's their decision, right? I will encourage her to do things, or I may encourage things, but ultimately when she's an adult, that's her decision, in the same way that it was my decision to choose what I wanted.
So let's get back to the prayers. So you don't have to have a, and I can't think of the name, it's not a priest, it's not
Imam.
Imam. You don't have to have one to pray?
No.
You can just, and you don't have to be in a congregation of any.
It's preferable to pray with people if you can. If you have people that you're able to pray with, it's always preferable. Even in Christianity, it's preferable to pray with people, from my understanding and my education as a child. But in Islam, you don't have to have an imam there. You do have to have a leader of the prayer, but it doesn't need to be an imam. If you're mixed gender, it should be a man leading a prayer. But a lot of times I'll be with my daughter or my daughter's friends or my friends, and it will be a woman leading women, and that's totally allowed. It's just that a woman can't lead men in prayer.
So could you give us, and believe it or not, we're almost out of time, but could you give us kind of a synopsis of when you do go to your mosque, in terms of what is the organization of that service similar to other faith religions that people would be aware of?
So like most Christians, their holy day is Sunday, some it's Saturday. For Muslims, it's Friday, and we would go to a Friday prayer, or a khutbah, which is like a sermon, is in the afternoon. So typically it's around 12 or 1 o'clock in coordination with the afternoon prayer. You would go for the prayer, but also for a sermon. In the same way when you go to church, you would go to listen to the sermon, you would have prayers and stuff. We don't have singing or any of that, but we would pray as a large group.
So you do pray out loud.
You pray out loud. You are led by the imam. Women and men are separated in most mosques. Okay, so here in the U.S., for example, the mosque we were talking about earlier, that's at Seven Corners at Crossroads, the women are actually in a balcony above the men. The men are below. Some mosques, women are in the back of the mosques. In a very rare circumstance, there's not any separation. The separation is to keep people from being distracted in their prayers, right? But in most places it's separate, not every single place. And there has been some discussion around these things at different times in different areas about how much separation there has to be. But it's a man that leads the prayer. And there's usually a separate entrance for women, separate area to wash. There is always a separate entrance, a separate area to wash, a separate bathroom, place to leave your shoes. There's usually, in the mosque, like in a church, there's fun things to do. They do lots of activities, so there's going to be different rooms and different organizations and stuff there.
Like you would in any religious
Exactly.
faith.
You're going to have other things. You have Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and you have different types of organizations, and they do yoga on Saturday mornings and stuff like that, because it's hard. I can't go to the YMCA and do yoga in front of everybody, but we have yoga for women on Saturday mornings.
So I want to touch a little bit about the breaking of the fast, because especially as it nears the end of the month, because I feel that's the time the breaking of the fast gets a little bit more festive, shall we say.
Right. So the last 10 nights of Ramadan are said to be the holiest. So it does become much more festive, and you're getting closer to Eid, which is after Ramadan is the first day, and Eid actually is the word for feast. So it's the feast day at the very end. So after the last day, then you break your fast, and the whole next day is all about eating. So all the calories that you didn't consume for 30 days, you're going to consume in that one day. But when you break your fast, you're going to eat a variety of foods depending on your cultural preferences, oftentimes. You're going to use dates. Dates are a recommended food during Ramadan. They're very high in nutrition and fiber, so they're very good for you. Dates are recommended. And there are a lot of cultural preferences. You see people from different areas that are going to want to eat different foods. For example, one image I have of going with my husband, he's from North Africa, from Algeria, they sell lemonade. Lemonade is a thing that you drink when you break your fast. And so they sell it on the side of the road in little bags and containers. So you see all these brightly yellow colored containers during Ramadan only. You don't see it any other time of the year. But you would break your fast, typically with a date, and then you would have a light meal. To include a soup, usually some fruits, a lot of times homemade breads, different things, and then you're not gonna be able to eat very much because your stomach has actually become so small from fasting. Your eyes are really big, but your stomach is very small. You'll only make the mistake of overeating once or twice, but you eat a small meal and then you wait. You'll usually eat a second meal a little bit later, but there's not anything that you have to eat when you break your fast.
Well, this has been very enlightening, and so when I see you, do I say Happy Ramadan?
You can say Happy Ramadan. In Arabic, you would say Ramadan Kareem, which just means Happy Ramadan. You can say at the end of Ramadan, Happy Eid. And Muslims would respond. They'd be very happy that you thought of them, that you considered them in that way. It's a good feeling whenever anybody respects or remembers something that was important to you. So we have a lot of Muslims that work here. Sometimes you might not know that they're Muslim. You can always ask if they celebrate or they're fasting. And definitely, it's very touching when people remember that.
Well, thank you so much, Emily, for coming on and once again sharing your story and enlightening us to this month-long observance, and happy Ramadan.
Thank you so much.